I think a lot of media coverage, especially mainstream media coverage and television, they're getting better about talking about climate change elements. The question is whether people are actually receiving that message. That often gets lost in the discussion very easily. My name is Omer Irfan. I'm a science correspondent at Vox, currently reporting on the wildfires going on in California. Right now in Southern California, we're seeing an explosive growth in wildfire activity in and around the Los Angeles area. These were fires that picked up very quickly over the course of a few days. They ignited and then basically within a day started covering hundreds, if not thousands of hectares. This was forecasted actually very far in advance. That's because the winter this year in California has been very dry, but also there are these powerful winds that come from the mountains and blow towards the coast. They're called the Santa Ana winds, and they've been exceptionally strong this year. They've been blowing at about 120, 130 kilometers per hour. The answers are not always the same. There are different ways that these fires play out, and that's part of what makes it so complicated. The fires in the northern part of California, for instance, are much different from those in the southern part, because in northern California, it's mainly forests. In southern California, it's mainly grasslands and what's called chaparral, which is shrubs and brush. That's why it's important to take each wildfire as its own individual story and then see what elements connect to the bigger story of things like human development and climate change. It is one of the wealthiest parts of the country. This is, Hollywood. It's where a lot of celebrities live. It's where a lot of rich people live. But it's also like one of the most densely populated parts of the country. It's also one of the most populated parts of the country, period. There's about 10 million people that live in Los Angeles County. So the impact of these fires is massive. And then there's both the federal government owns a lot of land in California, as well as the state and as well as the city. And so you have different levels of government fighting over accountability over different pieces of land. So there's so many major intersecting storylines here, and that's part of why it's gotten national and international attention. I think a lot of media coverage, especially mainstream media coverage and television, they're getting better about talking about climate change elements. They do bring it up. Meteorologists do talk about how average temperatures are rising and contributing to the risk, but it's often in a very general sense. Like they can't really drill into specifics, and that's partly because you also don't want to over extrapolate and over promise. You don't say that this fire was made 20% worse because of climate change. There may be studies that can confirm that, but they take time to perform. So in the moment when the fires are burning, I think people are trying to cautiously talk about a lot of the other factors at work. But the complicated factor is also that it's not just climate change. This is not just a climate change story. It's also other human decisions. It's politics, it's geography, political corruption, and greed. Those are also at work here as well. And so figuring out which specific level of government to blame, who to hold accountable here, is a little bit tricky. I think there's enough accountability and blame to go around when you see a disaster like this. You can draw a comparison to some of the hurricanes we had on the east coast of the United States last year that also became a major political story. There were scientists and reporters and journalists who talked a lot about the climate elements, but very quickly it became a political story about which governor was in charge and which political party was in charge of the recovery, and that often gets lost in the discussion very easily because there are so many factors at play. Climate change does have predictive capacity. We can sort of anticipate where the risks are rising. It's not just a science question, it's a question about accountability. When we have these signals, when we understand that the planet warms and it has these kinds of consequences, can we expect that our leaders prepare for this accordingly? And if they don't, is it their fault? Can we say, do they deserve blame for not adequately taking responsibility for this? A disaster doesn't happen because of just one thing. It happens because lots of different things are going wrong at the same time.